So just to set this up a little bit, this piece of work is something that's been ongoing for quite a while. I think Mike mentioned we started back in September, October, something like that. And a lot of the folks we have here on the panel were in fact part of this steering group. So it's sort of the great and the good of big data in the UK. And I might actually, as everybody's assembled a little bit ahead of time, I might ask you all to just say a few words about who you are and your role in big data. Maybe I can start with you, Peter.
Good morning, I'm Peter Jackson, Chief Data Officer at Southern Water, and we are pretty much just starting our journey on to big data and advanced analytics.
Hi everybody, Peter forgot to tell you he also is the co-author of a book that we did together, so I'm not letting him off.
Yeah, we have visual aids for this one. I think you guys might be signing this later on for lucky people.
We are, yes.
All right, great. Don't give the game away just yet.
Sorry, spoiler alert. Hi everybody, I'm Caroline Crothers. I am the Group Director of Data Management at the Lowell Group, and I'm also a trustee of SILIP.
Hi everyone, I hope this is audible in the back. Abbas, I'm a strategy consultant by training, and I'm a Director of Strategy and Innovation at Hortonworks.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Foster, CEO and founder of a consultancy business called Synergure.
Hi, and I'm Mike again. Just one other thing I meant to mention, of course. Many thanks to Hortonworks for sponsoring the survey. So, yeah, anyway, so.
Indeed, without that noise. So I think you'll agree, a pretty good roundup of the great and the good from the industry. So I'd like to crack on if I could. There's quite a lot to go through. Hopefully get some interesting debate going on. And the question we posed ourselves was, will the UK, that's led in the previous revolutions, actually be able to take the lead in this industrial revolution? And just in case some of you might think maybe the UK is not very serious about this, we did actually ask the government how serious they were. And you can see here we have a quote from Alan Matt. He's the chair of the all-party group on the fourth industrial revolution. So this thing's real, recognised by government. And if any of you are listening to the Today programme, you can hear the Minister for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport reinforcing the fact that this really is something that we need to take seriously if the events that are going to unfold over the next few years in our economy are going to help us succeed. So, without further ado, I think we'll dive right in to a question. And this is a question about maturity. For those of you who can't perhaps read as clearly, I'll just mention that this goes from left to right in terms of maturity, starting with no strategy in place, moving to a strategy that's been created but not yet delivered, one that's been working for the last 12 months or so, and one that's a little bit more developed from that. So in terms of maturity, in many ways, we were quite enthused about this. And maybe I'll start, Mike, could I start with you perhaps on maturity and whether this was a surprise to you?
It was a surprise because a lot of the organizations were really only in the first 12 months of a data analytics strategy. I was thinking, we'd see a lot bigger numbers beyond that stage. Although one thing that was when I looked at it by size of business, on the most mature sector, the far right, media and entertainment, over 80% of large media and entertainment firms had a data strategy beyond 12 months. So, and in a way I kind of think, because they're so reliant on a clickstream and ad serving and everything like that, that they really had to be early adopters, and I think that's true. But yeah, to me the big surprise was I was expecting the right-hand side to be a lot more mature, than it is.
And Abbas, you're obviously working in the space. Does this ring true to you? Is this what you're seeing? People have pretty much got a mature model right now and they just need to execute, or are you seeing a little bit more naivety in the market right now?
I think the answer depends upon which industry we are talking about. So from what we've seen is, typically if you take any technology, not only big data as such, more often than not, it takes 12 to 18 months to transfer from Silicon Valley to continental Europe, and then it's another 12 to 18 months out to Asia. But we hope that this year and the year next year, 2018, is when the chasm curve will cross. So there are a few industries which are a bit more mature, like telecom, retail, or even financial services to an extent. However, the other industries are just picking up. So I would sort of agree with the result.
And Caroline and Peter, obviously you've just written a book on this very subject. In terms of data strategy, where would you place the UK in the sort of firmament of the world? Pass the mic there very nicely.
I think it's something that we're picking up on. I think in certain sectors and certain places you'll find a fairly mature data strategy. But I think my own personal experience, I'm the first Chief Data Officer into Southern Water, been there 7 months. I think that's a reflection of the immature state, the starting point people are getting to. And prior to that, I was the first head of data at the pensions regulator. So both of those first. So I think it shows that it's in an early stage.
Okay, Caroline, did you want to add to that?
Sorry, I was just going to add, going back to the maturity question as well, one of the things we talked about was how long it takes the technology to bed in, but what we're talking about here is a real culture change as well, and that normally typically takes about 2 years to really bed in as well. So it's very hard to be mature when we're within 12 months of doing a data strategy.
And you've set me up nicely, actually, because the next thing we looked at was, in fact, culture and sort of some of the things that people are looking to use this technology for. And as Mike touched on earlier, it seems as though customer engagement at that front, sort of the front office type use cases are the things that are being used, and a little bit less on actually using the data that they're getting to develop new products, etc. So in terms of the culture, do you think that that's something that we need to change? Do we need to embed it more in things other than customer loyalty? Let's go to Jason. Jason, how do you feel about the way that the technology is being used from your clients? And I know you might want to fill in a little bit of your background, because I think that's quite interesting for people as well.
Yeah, cool. So as I said in the intro, I run a consultancy business. I've been in this space for 10, 15 years. Previously ran big data analytics and marketing solutions for Marks and Spencer's, so been at the sort of the sharp end of doing this stuff. And decided to move into helping other organisations make the transition and really go on a journey. And in terms of this, I mean, I think from a cultural perspective, I think that's the biggest driver for being able to really get the use cases flowing. So there might be point solutions, there might be point use cases being done in various parts of the business, but culturally at a sort of an enterprise and corporate level, it's not sort of proliferating across the organisation. In terms of sort of longer term goals, which is sort of the point of this question and the sort of the surprising point around 13% focusing on that, I don't actually think 13% is too bad. I mean, there's a lot of organisations that are focusing on today. They're reacting to what's happening in their business. There's operational pressures, there's issues that happen, there's customers to interact with, and a lot of time people's energies and efforts get focused on solving that. And then they struggle to sort of look up and focus more longer term.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big challenge. I think some of the reasons for not being able to focus on longer term comes down to skills and having enough people in the business that have the maturity to look ahead. I guess both at a corporate level, but in the grassroots of an organisation as well.
And we're going to come on to skills. Peter, I know you're sort of new in, and I'm sort of fascinated by your business. There's a lot of sort of hard metal, kit, gear, big stuff, fatbergs, etc. that you have to deal with. If you don't know what a fatberg is, look it up. It's interesting stuff. But I wouldn't have thought that that you would have the data would from those things are as being as used as the front end, billing, etc. I mean, is that a drive that you're on to change that culture, the use cases?
I found these results very interesting. Obviously, customer engagement is very high for us. We have 4.5 million customers, so understanding our customers, how we engage with our customers is very important. But because we're not retail, banking, media, we're a heavy utility sector, so asset management, understanding our asset and our infrastructure is really important. Caroline's nodding from Network Rail experience. And if you got into that sector, I think you would have had another range of answers all around asset management, predictive analytics, looking to try and locate fatbergs before they become a problem in the sewers. You know where to jet and spray. So it is sort of, depending on the sector, you get a very different answer, I think. But certainly customers for us as well.
So one perhaps for next year.
I think certainly customer centricity is almost horizontal across all industries. It's so important now to just retain customers and not just grow them, because with digital channels and people connected to mobile apps and all of that, they can switch loyalty at the touch of a mobile phone screen, and so loyalty is becoming cheap. People are just looking for good deals, comparisons, etc. And for that reason, I think organizations are having to grab as much data as they can in order to have a deeper understanding, more personalized service to keep customers, because the rate at which they can lose them has taken a quantum leap over the last few years, as far as I can see.
Yeah, and of course that's going to change very much with open banking, which is even sooner than GDPR. That's January this year.
Yeah.
Abbas, use cases for you, mostly customer centricity or right through the various processes from a Hortonworks perspective?
So we see use cases all across the spectrum. So again, I would say it depends upon A, which industry you're from, and B, at which maturity level you are. So if I were to classify the families of use cases across two big areas, which is the renovate play, which is all about taking costs out, improvement in margins, complexity reductions, the standard data ETL archive, that kind of use cases. And then the other side is innovate, which is what you were referring to, is all about customer acquisition, loyalty, etc., etc. I would say a lot of the companies have a disconnect between the C-suite and what the lines of businesses want. So we did our own survey and we found out that almost 90% of the lines of businesses and middle managers had a clear understanding of how the data strategy or a coherent and robust data strategy would manifest into business results. And only a third of the C-suite understood that. So it's also a function of, to your point earlier, is that how is the culture being manifested and how are people taking actions around that is a big driver in what is the kind of use cases that you're looking into. Because if you think of it, a lot of it is also about not only about the investment you make, but about the skill sets and the people you hire. And that all encompasses within the culture itself.
Yeah.
Just to pick up on a point, and I think we've kind of alluded to it a little bit, and I do love the phrase, sometimes the next big thing is getting the last three big things right. One of the reasons that, for me, data is so important is we're looking over the horizon to things like artificial technology, blockchain, Internet of Things, all really, really exciting. We'll be building a house on sand if we don't get our data culture right at the base of it.
Lovely, and I think you've teamed me up quite nicely, guys. So let's look at the UK talent pool here, and in terms of where we should be looking to get these technical skills. So if we look at the answers to the question, 72% are actually saying cloud, 58% data science, 52%, it's an old word, it's coming back, software engineering, 50% are saying data preparation, which we are hearing a lot about. We're very interested in what the panel's going to say about that. 40% on the solution architecture, 35% for those poor old statisticians, and data engineering as opposed to software engineering coming in at 33%. So who wants to have a swing at this one? Why don't we start, Jason? What do you think about these skill sets? I know that you guys are supplying some of those skill sets.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the key that we find is creating a rounded team that has all of the skills that you need to do this. It's not a single person that can do this end to end, particularly for larger organizations. You need to find the right mix, both with the business skills. We heard about the sort of storytelling requirement of being able to articulate the insights and the outcomes so people can take real action. And we need to sort of flex up all of the sort of the level of technology, business, analytical skills, all within one team, and pushed out within the rest of the organization to really win.
Mike, some thoughts?
Yeah, I think certainly the big surprise for me was cloud, because Europe has always been the skeptic on cloud, particularly as you head further into mainland Europe, because they've been more skeptical. But to see UK really grabbing it with both hands, for me, was a surprise, to be honest. But I think, I mean, data science, the data prep thing is only at number 4 there, but I think that it would be a lot higher if users had the confidence to do it for themselves. And I think there's an educational gap that vendors of self-service data preparation tools are going to have to plug in order to give people the confidence to use those kinds of tools in order to get that number up. But the fact that it does seem to me, at least looking at these figures, is that cloud-based data and analytics is well underway.
This is great news for the cloud vendors here. And Caroline, I know your book talks about, a lot of this, what skills you need and blending teams. Can you give us your take on this?
One of the things that I was just going to mention is I'm not convinced it's going to be as clear cut as some of these. I think going forward we'll be using a lot more hybrid roles. People have different skill sets. Business skills are incredibly important, and we can't just assume that you come in with your traditional bag of tools that you've always used before and it's always going to work. So for me, it's much more about the blend, the hybrid, using people within the business and giving them the ability to be able to capitalize on the base data.
Thank you. Peter?
I think the one skill that's missing from here that Mike mentioned earlier on is people in the team are able to create the narrative. It's all very well to do the advanced analytics, to manage the data, to engineer the data, but unless you can explain, you've got people in the team who can engage with the business and explain the outcomes, explain the problem, can listen to the problem from the business and describe it to the data scientists. So I think that kind of skill is missing from above.
Yeah, for me that was a real call out for a big gap there about, there's some great people out there producing insights from all this data, but if somebody can't explain it, they're not going to act on it. And so as a result, there's a real void there that needs filled.
I think one of the things that also is missing from here is I don't think this is always about creating insight for someone to look at to then decide what to do.
Right.
One of the sets of skills that's missing here is how do you push the answer into the end, the roots and branches and the end point, the customer end point of your organization, so that not an individual has to sit there and make a decision from the insight. Clearly there's a whole load of stuff that you need to do around that, but actually getting to the point where you're actioning off the back of the insight without someone having to intervene.
And I just want to add one point to what Mike said, that I think there's an educational gap. So there is a perception amongst a lot of executives that we'll just go to the cloud providers and we'll just click a button and everything will go through because of agility, cost reduction and all of that. But if you think of it, most Fortune 500 companies have large IT organizations. And businesses generally, or opcos, have their own choice. They could go out to a vendor or they could come to the internal IT. So what is the role of the IT become? What is the value that you add? The only value that you add in that case is you become a provider of providers. And what is the biggest skill set that you've got to have in that case, which is governance? Because that is the one key challenge which a lot of the people are facing. And if you have a hybrid cloud strategy, which a lot of organizations will have, data governance is a big thing which a lot of people are not focusing. And again, that's the educational gap around there which we need to address.
Well, yeah, I think the people, just one second, Caroline, I know where you're going. The people skills are very important, and something that really we did not expect to find came up in our next question, which was about the strategy for obtaining the right skills. And really surprisingly, 60% of people said the identification and redeployment of existing skills, which is great news if you're already in the game, I guess. Recruiting more permanent staff, we thought that would be much higher, 54%. Upskilling, 52% through internal or external training. 46% want to recruit contract staff. 47% to come along to industry forums. Maybe that number should be higher for Big Data London, don't know. And just 2% saying they're going to outsource all of this to third parties. To your point, Abbas, about are you just an outsourcer of outsourcers? Caroline, you wanted to talk specifically about skills transfer and this sort of stuff.
Sorry, one of the things that I just wanted to pick up on actually is just taking it back a step. I think one of the reasons that we've got in the state that we have in a lot of cases with our data is that the business has abdicated their responsibility and assumed that IT was taking care of all this for them. I'm a big advocate for the business owning the data. IT completely and totally owns the tools that the data sits within, but if you have an Excel spreadsheet, it doesn't magically come up with the calculations on your own. You have to put something in there to get it to do something. So when it comes to the responsibility between IT and the business, for me, I want to see the business stepping up.
Nice one. Thoughts on that? Anyone else? Anyone want to pile in?
I just add, I don't think it's about one side stepping up or the other. I think it's about a collaboration. I think this sort of delineation between IT looks after tech and business doesn't. A lot of marketing departments have their own technology that they have. This is about bringing the right skill to the right job, and what technology teams have a great experience of doing is driving the right deals, getting the right contracts in place, innovation with technology, and that needs to come together with the business requirement and really bring it together.
So Peter, we've had a conversation about this. I know, and no need to say anything commercially confidential, but you have identified, to the first point here, transferable skills within your team. It's something you look for, it's something you bring to the table. Can you just talk at a high level through that process?
Yes, our starting point was to actually look internally for those skill sets. I'm looking at some of my colleagues around the room now. Was to look internally for the skill sets. They are the people who understand the data. They're the people who've been doing the job with the data for many years and keeping the business running. So they understand the data. And I think that there is a general acceptance of a desire to upskill, to learn new techniques and new methodology. So if those people are there who understand the data, why not recruit from internally?
Great question.
I think there's a few things to be said about this. For me, this is a real eye-opener. It also says to me, the ownership is in the boardroom. Data and analytics is strategically important. They're investing in their own employees. They'd rather do that and keep those skills in-house and upskill people and do that. If you're a systems integrator, you're in trouble here because 2%, I mean, that's really bad news for systems integrators. But what's also clear to me, even from a vendor in this market looking at this, is they have to get to the business and talk to them about educating them about their technology because there's an enormous thirst for it. I mean, that's what they want, you know, rather than going to the systems integrators and saying, come and sell our technology, which is not what's going to happen here. I mean, in the UK, it's very clear that the business is saying, we own this, we think it's strategic, we want the skills in-house, we do not want these people to leave because it's so important to us. So to me, I mean, this was just the complete balance is in favor of internal skills than going to the outside world.
And another point that I was just going to add was I think we need to start and move away from some of the traditional models of hiring people in a specific way. So to give an example, if you're a small to medium-sized company, you're probably not going to have your own dedicated chief data officer. They're a costly resource. Go rent one. You know, why can't we share? Why can't we use different, more innovative models than assuming you just have to have a full-term person sitting on your balance sheet?
So I think this is right on the next question, which is, what are you doing to change the culture and therefore get these people perhaps interested in taking up these roles? And so we've got the point you made before about running internal hackathons. Bizarrely to me,
that was amazing.
Bizarrely, that's the number one thing that people are doing. So they're saying, come on, have a go, let's hack at this data. You've got the business knowledge, as you said, Peter, and we'll take it forward from that.
But doesn't it tell you, though, that the collaboration is really important here? It's trying to fuel collaboration in the enterprise and say, throw data in the middle, here's some tools, have a go at it, make fun out of it, but trying to break the walls down between business and IT is really a collaborative thing here. It's really evident from my
we find coming into organisations that one of the biggest roles we end up playing, even if it's not what we've been invited to play, is this this ability to sit between, sort of, to put the walls back up for a minute, a business and an IT, or business and technology, or even between different business departments, and help to sort of triage between groups of people around culture, around ways of working, around agile methodologies, around the technology and how best to use it, around the data that you want to go after, around the use cases that are most valuable, and we end up playing this role that sits between these different, what normally would be different departments, and help to sort of bring those together to help collaborate. And the ones that collaborate best are the ones that move the agenda forward most.
I think when it comes to business and IT, the data people are the and.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things which is missing over here is that it's also very important to tell the whole story. So what we have seen in a few organizations is that a lot of the times people do a hackathon without actually telling the participants how will the results be used, how does it fit into the overall strategic goals and objectives for the organization, how does it fit into the tactical levers that you're employing on a day-to-day basis. So if you do that quite well, obviously there's a larger interest than if you do the decision making in silos and people feel that they're just part of a smaller thing. And that is something what we have seen particularly in humongous organizations like banking, where every different unit is running with their own P&L, with their own data management teams, with their own workforce as well.
I think whichever technique you take to address culture and bring a new culture into an organization, whether it's a hackathon or something else, I think culture is probably the most important thing. Breaking down those silos, probably the most important thing. There's a wealth of technology. There's people who really want to do this stuff, but it's getting the culture in the organization to embrace data and to use it.
I think the only other thing I would like to say about this chart, just to wrap it up, is the fact that number 2 and number 3 on here are breaking things into teams and aligning communities around strategic business objectives. That says to me, yeah, we're going to allow collaboration, hackathons, and all the rest of it, but we want to organize it, align it with customer or risk or operating efficiencies or whatever, and make sure that these projects are enabled in order to deliver value for the enterprise. It's not a free-for-all.
So comes the question then, with all this change of culture, etc., whose throat are we choking? Who's the she or the he that is responsible for that? Which of course we asked. And we said, who's the most senior person in charge of data, and who do they report to? Because that's very important if we're getting warm and fuzzy and collaborative, etc. So as we see here, 55% of people say it's the chief data officer reporting to the CEO, so extremely important. One level below the top person, and as we've seen with recent cases in the media, get it wrong as a CEO, you could be facing a dole queue. 31% said the chief data officer, perhaps somewhat more traditionally reporting to a CIO. 10% to the point that one of the panel made, this is going into line of business. 10% are looking at CMOs being the person that the chief data officer reports to, and the reverse of that, the CMO reporting to the CDO, 4%. Now, looking at this, Abbas, I'm thinking, this is going to make it very difficult for me to shift some technology. Who am I selling to, and who are they internally selling to? What are you seeing from a job title movement?
So we see that a lot of the times is dependent on what kind of organization is it. So say, for example, if I have to pick an FMCG company, a lot of the spend, their external spend, is data-oriented, but sits with the CMO. And naturally, the CMO feels that it's my budget, it's my responsibility, and the buck stops with me, and therefore I have ownership of the CDO. But we ran a survey with a lot of different organizations. What we felt was there are multiple different types of structures. So there's a standard federated structure. You have the nascent one as well. But the most successful companies are the ones where they have a hybrid structure, whereby, pretty much akin to this, the CDO reports to the CEO, but also has a dotted line to the CIO. What that allows is the CDO has the autonomy to go after futuristic projects, whereby they don't necessarily have to think about the cost pressures that the street is caring about, particularly if it's a publicly listed company. And also, because they have a dotted line with the CIO, they can actually leverage the CIO or the IT organization without having to build everything from scratch. So that allows for economies of scale. And across industries, by far the hybrid model has been the most successful.
Yeah, Jason.
I think there's a few things here. The CDO role is still in its infancy. It's relatively new. And what we see is that either the CDO role, or certainly the most senior person in charge of data, tends to be wherever the most data, the most value from that data sort of exists in that organization at that time. So if the use case and the agenda is about, as we saw earlier, loyalty, customer insight, customer engagement, then that's often sits with a sort of marketing, and if that ends up with CMO, fine. In other very digital businesses, it might be the chief digital officer, because of the obvious sort of huge amounts of data that digital businesses sit on. So depending on where the use case starts, often that's driving where the CDO lands. And also, as it's in its infancy, nobody really knows where best to place it.
I'm really tempted to ask the panel, certainly the practitioners, who the CDO reports to, but I won't do that. I'll spare your blushes. Peter, I'm sure your team knows. Did you have a comment on these findings in terms of who's reporting to who?
Yes, and I think the point I'd like to pick up again from Mike's presentation earlier on, I think it largely depends not only on the context of the organisation, but also that level of maturity. I think whilst there is that need to develop and deliver a data strategy and get the foundations in place so you're not building on sand, to be innovative about new approaches, I think you'll find a CDO reporting very high up in an organisation. That over time may then shift into reporting elsewhere, possibly the CIO. I currently report directly into a director.
That's what came out of the more detailed analysis was as the data analytics strategy grows and is adopted more, is more cemented in, if you like, becomes part of the foundation. At that point, you can see the CEO saying, "Okay, I'm okay with this now. I'll let that go and relinquish control a bit." But for me, it was pretty clear very, very early on how heavily involved they are, and so for that reason, for me, it was a very warm feeling in the sense that to see. I've been in this business for 35 years and in analytics for most of it and data for most of it. And it's really only in the last few years that you really see the importance of analytics making it into the boardroom. And now it really is there. And it's very clear it's central. It's absolutely central to everybody's...
Just for time, I need to just try and speed us up a little bit. These are great points. Caroline, we'll get you in a sec, don't worry. So what technology are we talking about? What are these guys playing with? And I'm sure a lot of vendors will look long and hard at this statistic, just again, because it's reasonably hard to see. The largest use case, we asked the question, what are you using today? And what's going to have the value in the next, so which technology has value in the next 3 years? And which one are you going to use subsequent to that you have got, but you haven't actually, you need, but you haven't got? See what I mean? So the biggest one that people are using over the next 3 years, data lakes, which also, if we look, that's a bottom statistic, 54%. If you see also which of the technologies you don't need, not so much need, sort of logically, right? 18% of people. The biggest thing that people don't have today that they need, surprise to me, enterprise information management tools and suites. Mike, I'm going to come to you and Abbas as the technology expert, see if I can, and then people just pile in, but thoughts, comments, questions?
Well, I mean, it tells me a couple of things. I'm surprised larger organizations have already got EIM well down the track, but I think it's pretty clear the number of data sources is going off the scale. There's so much data coming in from so many places, and the idea that you can do this through relatively crude techniques is just getting overwhelmed. And as a result, we need more robust tooling to be able to handle this. And across a hybrid environment, cloud, on-premises, multiple data stores, Hadoop, relational, cloud storage, need software that goes across it. And right. I think the whole data lake scene is not just about a central data lake. It's multiple data stores in a logical data lake. But I think the other one was the self-service data prep. I mean, both of those coming up top. One's EIM is more of an IT thing, self-service business thing. But both of them together reigning tall for 2018 over analytics just tells me how much of a challenge and the complexity of data has now become within enterprises, and they're reaching out for tooling to be able to manage it on a more robust level.
So VCs in the room note EIM's the way to go. Abbas, did you want to say anything on this?
Yeah, so I said I can clearly see that data lake is the big thing to go after, because that does solve a lot of the issues which you mentioned, Mike, around scale and use cases and all of that. But I'll come back to my earlier point, which is the surprising thing over here for me is data governance. And the reason is, on a day-to-day basis, we see that the business generally do not understand or do not have a fundamental understanding of who owns the data and what happens to the data after they've put it into the data lake. For them, it's like, I put everything into data lake, there's a data scientist who's a nerd or a geek who presses the button and they get the results. So there's a lot of things which happen before that from a staging perspective, management perspective. And as you mentioned, Mike, if you have on-premise multiple clusters and multiple vendors as well, so interoperability is a big thing going forward, specifically with IoT and all of those use cases coming in. What most of the businesses they should be thinking about is a one-stop shop, at least, from a data governance play, which I think is missing over here.
All right, we're coming to that at some pace. Sorry, moving on. Which of the following advanced technologies do you use when it comes to delivering insight? So this is the analytics piece. Again, somewhat controversial. Machine learning out in front, 71%. Artificial intelligence, some people wonder what that means, 62%. Drop learning and graph analytics follow that, 56 and 38. And then streaming analytics down at 24%. I'm coming to you. I know you spotted a typo, but
all right, no
pile on through there, Mike.
Deep learning, not. All right, no worries. Yeah, I mean, to me, the only worry to me is the 62% figure on AI, which I was really surprised about, considering how young AI is. And the only thing I was worried about was whether or not people are perceiving that term as an umbrella term to cover everything else, machine learning, everything else. But nevertheless, I mean, machine learning, back in the 90s we called it data mining. It's still alive, but it's very, very clear. Predictive analytics, prescriptive analytics is firmly where companies want to go now. We've done the data warehousing thing. We've got historical data. We can look in the past. We understand what's in the rearview mirror. But what we really want now is where do we go next? And with competition coming at you from all sides, almost every vertical these days, they absolutely are reliant on analytics to be, to give those alerts, those early warnings, and very clearly, predictive is very hot on the agenda. I mean, some areas, 38% of graph, I actually thought is higher than it might turn out to be. But I think because of the importance around anti-money laundering and fraud, I think that's the driver for that one.
Right, again, and I think our time's moving rather quickly. This one's something that I know people have personal opinions on. Obviously, Brexit is an important thing. And we asked people a series of questions about how they thought this was going to go. From the panel, obviously at this point we can take personal points of view. Rod, if you don't want to comment, I'll quite understand it. But people were generally optimistic about the ability for them to grow their own talent post-Brexit, which is pretty counterintuitive from a lot of people's perspective. Jason, did you have any thoughts on why people in these specific industries are so confident that they've got the people that they need, perhaps referring back to the internal promotion?
I think organisations are going to need to step up regardless, and that's with or without Brexit. And people are gearing up for being able to do this stuff. We talked earlier about how organisations should be building their own internal capability. People are doing that now. We've seen that from the results, getting their own internal capability, have their own IP, have their own thinking done internally, create teams from within the team that you've got. So people are gearing up. I think GDPR, whilst not directly Brexit related, is forcing people to think about new ways of engaging their customer from a privacy point of view, new ways of managing data, getting their house in order. And that, I think, is going to drive some innovation and drive people to get better at this stuff with or without Brexit. But I think that's a sort of a good focus point for people to engineer around.
And then piling through, the UK's role in governance. Abbas, you were talking about whether we were going to be affected by various things. Number one, with a bullet, 26%. Most people are really concerned. It's the highest polling answer about concerns. GDPR is it. PSD2, which I mentioned, is much more imminent. Everybody seems to have nailed, and considering we're speaking to banks in this survey, that's interesting, up 5%. But a range. Anybody want to talk about GDPR in terms of...
I can take a go at it. So I do want to make a point in which I've been doing so for the last 6 months is GDPR for all purposes is a business opportunity, and businesses should not be taking it from the point of view that is an extra cost burden or extra pressures being added on the business, but because if anything, it'll allow you to have a more transparent view of your data supply chains, and it'll improve your efficiencies across different use cases. So GDPR definitely should be viewed in that light. And PSD2, yes, open banking is a big part, but a lot of it has to do with the first mover's advantage. It's like whoever cracks it first will at least have a head start of 6 to 12 months. And from a services point of view, if you look at the revenue sharing arrangements which most banks or other organizations are looking into with the data as a service model, that is the area which they will benefit most, and that's why it's a race to crack it first.
Okay, great. Mike, you surprised by this? Caroline?
Caroline knows.
I was only just going to mention, when it comes to things like GDPR, I think we should view it as an opportunity. This is our data that it's protecting as well. Yes. So from a personal point of view, I'd like to know where my data is and who's doing what with it.
All right, so finally, we asked the Brits how great Britain was. And, well, I'll just throw these results up. question we asked was, who's got the best data skills, who's got the best technology? And according to this survey, which once again, large respondents, large companies from media, banking and retail, 39% think we've got the best, Brits think Britain has the best technology. When it comes to the actual skills, they believe it's American technology, which I'm sure, Abbas, you'll be very happy to hear. What's slightly puzzling, given how we know that how good this technology is from places like China and Israel, etc., is just why why we're so pleased with ourselves. And maybe as a closing remark, maybe I could get a flippant comment from each of you as to why these really puzzling. Any take on why we're so pleased with ourselves?
Well, look, you've got to have confidence in yourself in this business. If you haven't, what's the point? And so I'm not surprised. I'm a bit surprised at perhaps the perceptions of other skills in other nations, but I think the headline out of this is, Britain's confident going forward, and that's good.
The government's going to like that. Jason?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the awesome event we're at. This is put on in the UK by Brits. This is brilliant. This is a great thing. There's 5,000 people coming through the door. 8,500 people. Sorry, I'm a few weeks out of date. I just think this is absolutely a good space. I think Britain's at the forefront of it. I think people like Sadiq Khan are wanting to make London the smart city of the world, and that's underpinned by digital and data. The ball is rolling. We're on it.
Nice message. Abbas, you've got to be pleased with the American showing here, right?
I wouldn't necessarily go that far, but one of the comments which I would actually make is, as I was mentioning to you earlier, is that a lot of it has to be, the perception game is around a function of opportunity you have, and because of the fact that Silicon Valley did start this whole digital / tech revolution back in the 1970s from the semiconductor and all of that age. There's been a lot of opportunity, and that's why you see the best people or a certain type of people who are interested in tech and digital, which is a large amount of people going towards that area. But however, if you look at the biggest hubs outside of the valley, it's probably London, Berlin and Tel Aviv. And because of the fact that London is such a cosmopolitan city and allowing other different opportunities, whether it be it's education, transportation, etc., going forward, this should be a big space for us or all the big data enthusiasts coming into the country and the city.
Caroline, Peter?
Just to throw something slightly different in, so that would be me. Data doesn't sit in silos. If you look at an organization, your data doesn't sit in silo. I see no reason why we should assume that our data skills will sit in silos either, and a country is just another big silo.
Wow, nice. You're living in a silo, Peter. Finish this off before I go for just 2 quick questions.
What can I say after this? I hope it not only reflects confidence, I hope it reflects aspiration. Aspiration that we want to be up there in the world doing this.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, well, it just remains for me to say, I'll take a couple of quick questions. Saskia is telling me it's a timeout, but we'll take, 1 or 2 questions. So you've got a couple. Just to, whilst you're thinking those up, just to remind you that this full report, the top-level report, is published today. This is the hashtag. So if you go there, you can download it. I think, they might need some data. Well, it's Big Data London. Do them a favour. But also, the more in-depth work, for those of you who were at the earlier session that Mike did, will also be available, and we're still figuring out exactly how that's available. If you're interested in sponsoring some of that, please speak to Mike. And with that, if anybody's got a question, I'll take a quick question. Sir, Saskia.
Hi there. I have a question about definitions. I think in the industry we tend to have very wishy-washy definitions. So, for example, data science just means different things to different people. And when you have a conversation, I think one of the first things, it takes about 10 minutes to figure out what is everyone's definition.
All right, that's great. Wishy-washy job titles.
Do we need to go to a place where we try to standardize these definitions, or shall we just spend 5 minutes every time we meet to
all right, guys, really quickly,
figure it all out? That's
Peter,
my question.
Wishy-washy for you, or do you... Oh, sorry.
I think certainly within an organisation, you need to have defined titles and roles and job descriptions so everybody understands what everybody does. Between businesses, I think it's quite exciting to spend 5 minutes explaining what you do.
Good answer. Caroline, nothing? Abbas? Jason, you must come up with a million different job titles, no?
That's what I do for a living, so yeah.
I
agree, lots of different job descriptions, it helps.
Anyone else before I close off? I know we're running out of time. Thanks for your patience. Please download the report. And a round
Thanks,
of applause, please,
everyone.
for our panel.
Thank you, guys.